Welcome to the world of light painting, everyone. This is one of the things I really enjoy doing is just seeing what happens when you play with light and make the world look a little bit different. You know, photography is all about light. And so I can think of nothing more exciting than photograph a sneaker sitting on a pizza box. I mean, what could be better than that? And especially, you know, what could be more glamorous than being in a closet and photographing a shoe sitting on a pizza box, sitting on a stool, and having a raincoat as a backdrop. But how that picture looks all depends on the light. So if you work the light, any boring subject can look pretty nice. So it's just a matter of using a little flashlight and the light, making the light work. So I get kind of excited by power tools, but taking pictures of them can be pretty dull until I break out my flashlight, and then it becomes something much more exciting. Or even wooden spoons can become rather dramatic with the right lighting. And so, as with most photos, the key to this is the light. And so to light these, I use a very small flashlight, and I'll show you my arsenal later. But during a exposure, I'm moving that light all around. I'm not holding it in one spot. So I'm basically in the dark, and I've covered my windows so I can do a very long exposure. So this one was shot at f20, and the shutter was open 29 seconds. But any one part of the scene is only getting light for maybe 2 or 3 seconds. And so I'm changing the angle of the light the whole time. I'm moving it around, and that's what gives me the unique look of this nice light rather than boring general light. So it's really pretty simple. Find something, set it up, turn out the lights, and get out the flashlight and use it like you would a paintbrush. You just slowly move the light around and light up what's interesting, make that the highlights, and then create shadows where you want to add some drama. So again, this is just sitting on a stool here in this little room that I'm working out of. Put some light on the bottles. I wish I would have turned the jug a little bit more to show the label to the right, but I didn't. But put a little light on the background, looks pretty interesting. So even something that starts out pretty, you know, that's fine. You know, I look at this picture and I go, yeah, that's okay. It's pretty. But when I change the light, you know, then it becomes something more special. And so for small things like this, I want to have a very tight beam of light and only have it hit part of the scene at any one time. And that little tight beam of light will accent areas that I want. So for the shots that you've seen so far, I just using a little pen light flashlight that has 1 or 2 AAA batteries. And the beam on any flashlight is too broad for me, so I make a real fancy snout for it. So it's very high tech. What I'm doing is I'm wrapping some aluminum foil around it, and I'm keeping the light from spreading out too much. And basically, the longer you make your snoot, the more concentrated the light will be. So it gives a very focused beam of light. So, you know, I have flashlights that will focus the beam, but still the light spreads out too much. So I want it to be like this spot on the shoe there. You know, I'm usually holding the light less than 6 inches away from the subject, and just keep it moving. And the farther away you move the light from the subject, the more it spreads out. So if you want to have a very defined spot, you move in close. If you want it to spread out a little bit, you move the light back a little bit. So all of these I'm shooting at ISO 100. I shoot pretty much everything at ISO 100. So all of them are that ISO. So when wrapping the foil around the light, I usually stick a pin in there so I can wrap the foil real tight, and it gives me a round hole. Then when I pull the pin out, I have a nice snoot, you know, a good snoot to focus that light. So if I just try to wrap it around without having like the pin inside, the foil will crumble too much. I'm up here in Vermont during the crisis, and I didn't bring my official black foil, that photo foil, which works even better than silver because it doesn't reflect any light. And I'm too cheap to buy more of it because I don't use it very often, and because it says photo on it, it's stupid expensive. So the aluminum works, but it's a lot of fun. And so, you know, I'll even get fancy and I'll put a drinking straw inside the foil, and then I wrap it with gaffer tape. And so that keeps light from leaking out around the foil. And that way, if the flashlight, you know, I wrap it entirely in black tape. That way I can't see the foil at all, but I wanted to show you what it looked like. That way, if the flashlight gets in the shot during the exposure, if it's all black, it won't show up. And it might not show up anyway if it's silver, if there's no light hitting it. But if your room's not completely black, that silver might show up. You know, just wrapping it in black tape and having that drinking straw inside means you can just wrap it tight, and the foil won't collapse, and the straw will let the light come out, and it makes a pretty cool looking light. Because, you know, I'm shooting all these in the dark. You know, it doesn't have to be pitch dark, but the darker it is, the longer exposure you can do and not have to worry about other light filtering in. And so by having that beam of light really tight, I can just light up parts of the photo and leave other parts in the shadow. And it just adds drama to just a really, really simple shot. So even an old filing cabinet becomes a bit mysterious with streams of light flowing onto it. Again, I'm shooting in the dark. I set my camera on bulb mode. I lock the shutter open using my remote shutter release, and then just walk around and shine the light on the subject until I've covered it. And then I go back to the camera and close the shutter. This one was about a 2-minute exposure. So again, f/16, ISO 100. However long you have, if you're in the dark, it doesn't matter how long your shutter's open, because again, any one part of the scene is getting maybe 2 seconds of light, because I'm just painting up and down, painting like a wall, you know. And so it just makes a real cool look.
Loren, you said just a couple of seconds, huh?
Any one part, yes. So the question is always, how do you know what the exposure should be? Yeah, I don't know. It depends on what flashlight I'm using, how tight the snoot is that I made, and how far away from the object that I am. So I shoot a lot of bad ones. You know, there's a lot of throwaways, and it takes some patience and some practice, but you immediately see on the camera where you're lighting it right and where you're not. So you just kind of remember, oh yeah, I was there for 3 seconds. That was too much. Maybe I only need to be there 2 seconds. Or maybe I need to be there 10 seconds, depending on how far away you are from anything, you know. And you can even the light out like I did in this shot. It doesn't have to be streaky, but you know, when you look at this, if you know, when I look at photos, any photo, I'm looking where's the light coming from. I'm always curious, where the hell was that light coming from? And then when I look at something like this, it's like, well, wait a minute. There's a shadow underneath this is an old broom. On the left side, there's a shadow dropping straight down, so that light had to be coming from overhead. But on the old padlock, there's no shadow there. How the hell's that happen? You know, if there's one light, you can't do that because the shadows are going different directions. But by moving my flashlight around, literally around the scene and coming at it from different angles, you eliminate some shadows and create some really unique shadows that just make for a really, really interesting look.
What type of lens are you using? Almost looks like a macro lens.
Oh, I don't know, a 24 to 105. You know, I'm kind of close on this one. This one might have been with my 100 macro. You know, but you know, it doesn't matter what you're photographing or how close you are. This is just a little clock I have.
Loren,
yes.
how do you do what do you set white balance? Because some of those lights are very cool, so I'm wondering what you do for white balance.
If you're shooting raw and your flashlight is your only light source, doesn't matter because you'll correct that in Lightroom.
Okay.
So, you know, in this case, it just doesn't matter. I probably have it on auto. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Sure.
What
So,
about if you're in can you learn?
so if you're shooting JPEG, you need to figure out about what the color is of your light, because it is much harder to correct a JPEG color correction than it is a RAW file. So most LED lights are on the cool side, so they're probably about a 3200 degree setting. So you'd want to do you know, if you're just using the settings on the camera, it'd be like in the shade or the you know, something like that gets you down in the cooler side. If you can do you know, you might have to do a custom setting and just light up something that's white and see in Lightroom what temperature that light is. You can, you know, if you got too much money, you can buy a color meter and it will read the color of the light. I used to use those all the time when I was in the flash world, the film world. It died on me, and I haven't used a color meter in years now. So you know, to balance it out though, you know, you do need, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later actually. So I'm seeing a bunch of things going by on the chat here, so let me see if we have any questions that I need to answer here. So do you need to keep the camera on bulb to achieve this? It depends. If you light the whole thing in less than 30 seconds, you can do it a 30-second exposure. If you light the whole thing in 10 seconds. So bulb is easiest because you just open the shutter, and if I'm close to something like this, even as big as this is, I'll just hold my shutter release and hold it open and with one hand and light the thing with the other hand. Or I'll lock it on if I'm in the dark and just let the shutter stay open for however long it takes you to light it up.
What is bulb? Bulb is a shutter?
So bulb is a setting on your camera. Depends on what camera you have. Most of them, it's when you go down your shutter speed down from 20 seconds to 30 seconds, the next setting past 30 seconds is bulb. It'll say either B or bulb. And what that means is as long as you hold your shutter button down, the shutter stays open. So if you stand there for an hour and hold your shutter button down, the shutter will be open for an hour. As soon as you let off, it goes off. So you can, if you're using a remote shutter release, it has a lock on it, so you can just push the button down, lock it, and it locks open until you turn it off. So you can just leave the shutter open however long you want. For indoor stuff, when I'm in darkness, I do that. This one actually, I was in my garage and I didn't even block off the windows. So I was on the other end of the garage. I could see what I was doing. It's about a 30-second exposure. Pretty much the light coming in the windows is what lit up the chunk of plywood behind the thing. So however much light that was, you know, I could see what I was doing. So it wasn't pitch black. Most of the other ones, you know, I prefer doing it in pitch black. The way I can just leave that shutter open and let it fly. Can you meter for the?
How do you know f-stop? What f-stop?
So that's dependent on how much depth of field I want. So I set my f-stop depending on what depth of field I want, usually a lot. So I'll go up f16, whatever, f20, 22, and then paint the light until it fills up. You know, it's like you know, if you think of it as filling up a glass with water, however big the glass is how much water you have to pour in. Same thing with this. How much light do you have to pour on it? However big the aperture is how much light you're literally pouring onto the scene. And you know, it just, you know, you could shoot this at 2.8 if you wanted, then you wouldn't have to light it very long, but you wouldn't have much depth of field. So it's whatever you want.
You would always use bulb? Is that?
No. If you know you're going to do it and light it up in 10 seconds, you can do a 10-second exposure. If you can do it in 1 second, you know, depending on what you're lighting, do a 1-second exposure. bulb's just easy. If you're in the pitch black, that way you don't have to worry about time. You can just, okay, I got my time. Take my time, light each little piece, take a look at it, say, oops, I messed up that corner. I made that too bright, or I didn't put enough light on that. This time I'll do it different. You know, I might, you know, I probably did 20 different shots to nail this one. Now, a couple others were pretty close. Some of them were horrible. Some of them, you know, not bad. Not bad. Can you meter for the bright spot using a flashlight, using the flashlight or a brighter spot on the subject? Yeah, I mean, you could meter it, but it's not that tough. You know, if you just try it, you know, okay, I'm way off. I'm either too bright, so I'll either move the light farther away or I'll do a shorter time. Or if I'm too dark, I'll either move the light closer or leave the light on whatever that spot is longer. And it, you know, after 2 or 3 exposures, you're feeling pretty good with what the exposure ought to be. So,
Loren?
yes. Somebody got a question? If you're talking, I can't hear you. Hold down your space bar the whole time you're talking.
Yeah, Loren, I had a question. So another way of saying this could be that if you shoot with a wider aperture, you can control the exposure timing. So if you don't want to sit there for 3 minutes, you can just open up the aperture to something wider and get the exposure time duration in seconds to be lower, right?
Sure.
30.
Sure. Absolutely.
Say that again. I'm not sure what he.
If you don't want to do a 20-second exposure, if you're at f11, if you go to f8, you're at 10 seconds because you've cut your time in half. If you go to f4, you're down to 5 seconds. So, you know, the bigger you're opening on your lens, the less time you have to let light flow into it.
So Loren, I have a question. Do you ever use your live view as a way of seeing how you're filling in the picture?
No. And the reason being is I'm not behind the camera when I'm doing this. I'm literally 4 to 6 inches away from my subject on these indoor shots. And so I'm not standing behind the camera to see it. I don't know that Canon builds the image. I don't know. I've never stood behind the Canon while I shoot it. I've seen other cameras that as you light it, it will build the image on the screen. Does a Nikon do that?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I've seen the Panasonic or somebody as you do a light painting, it will actually build the image on the screen. But like I say, I'm not standing behind the screen, and I don't want an external monitor. You know, I could put up another monitor so I can see what I'm doing, but I don't want the light from that filling in my scene. I want to be in a dark room.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
yeah.
I don't understand. You're not seeing through the camera?
No, so on some cameras, some mirrorless cameras, if you're doing a very long exposure, it will show you on the screen when you get to the proper exposure. Canons and Nikons don't do that. So unless you're shooting with it's either an Olympus or a Panasonic, that doesn't happen.
So,
Oh, well, so yeah, so somebody pointed out online, one of the reasons is your mirror's up. So as long as your mirror's up, if you have a DSLR, you can't see it because the mirror's up. That's not true. Your mirror's not up. In your live view, your mirror's up anyway. Sorry.
So do you take one question? Do you take a test shot first to make sure you like the composition? And then,
well, yeah, I'll do the test shot with the lights on to get my composition. Sure, sure. That's why I had the picture of the shoe sitting there on the pizza box, because I wanted to see if the picture looked, you know, if the scene looked the way I wanted. But it looks drastically different depending on how you light it. So what can look pretty boring is you know, look way different once you light her up.
Loren?
Yes.
Have you ever tried, when you've had too much light, using an ND filter and go from there?
You could, but it's just, I mean, it's just easier to not have either use a dimmer light or move the light farther away or something. I've never had occasion that I needed to dim it down because, you know, I'm using a pretty small pen light for these that doesn't put out a whole lot of light to start with. If you're using a bigger flashlight, you could do that, but I haven't had that problem.
I was
Where-
more addressing a situation where you have just too much light in the room and you can't get dark enough.
Well, but you're still going to have the same relationship of light. So,
Yes.
so it doesn't matter if you have an ND filter on or not. It's going to filter whatever flashlight you have. So you're not gaining a thing.
Have you ever tried one of those Lumi cubes?
Yeah, we'll get to those later. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what you light it with. You know, you can light them with your iPhone. You can light it with anything. You know, it's a light source. But the problem
How do you choose? You chose this Husky?
doesn't matter. I'm using a little pen light. It doesn't matter what kind. I've got all kinds. You know, I've got a dozen of them. I don't know why, because I'm nuts. But
Where do you get pen lights?
any store. Anybody's got a little, you know, a little mag light. You know, all kinds of, just a little itty flashlight.
All hardware stores have them in their checkout areas.
And where do you put the straw?
Right down the middle. And then just wrap the foil around it so that there's a hole when you take the straw, or you can leave the straw in or take it out. But you just want to make sure you have something in there, because if you wrap foil around it, it'll smash and then you don't have any hole and the light gets out. So
Can you wrap the black tape around it all?
sometimes, not always. Yeah. Sometimes I use black foil, so I don't need to, but
You get black foil.
yeah, any photo store has black foil, cinefoil. Okay, so, you know, it's fun doing little things, but you can do big things too. You just need a bigger flashlight. So this is a lighthouse up in Maine, and everything you're seeing here was lit with the flashlight except the sky. So again, it's ISO 100, 30 seconds, and I'm just moving the light all around the scene. And just, again, any one section might be getting 2 or 3 seconds of light, but as I paint across, it you know, just evens out. And so just like the small items, I'm not looking to light up the whole scene. I just want to add some drama and depth to the shot. So this is a Ferris wheel, lit it up, just put a little dab of light over on the right where it said arcade, and let the moon shine. Yeah, we have a question?
Yeah, I am familiar with that main shot. You had to be quite a bit away from that. So
Yeah.
how far can you be away from that?
Oh, how far can I be away from it? A long ways. You'll see in a minute. Depends how big your flashlight is.
Can we go back to that lighthouse view one more time, please?
It all depends on how big your flashlight is.
Okay, so how big was the flashlight in that? That's quite a bit of ways. I'm familiar with the area.
But well, you'll see in a little bit. I'll show you the flashlight I use on this.
Okay, thanks.
Loren, would you, like with the smaller ones, start with the 20-second exposure and experiment there, and then with the larger, start with more a 30-second, or?
So we'll talk a minute on how we figure out the exposure outside. It's different than the inside. So inside is purely how if you have the lights out, how long you're shining your light on the subject. Outside, you're matching the sky. I mean, we'll get into I'll get out of step here a little bit, but you're just matching the sky. So whatever your exposure should be for the sky, that's how much light you pour back in on whatever's dark, right? So in this one, again, a 30-second exposure. So I got all that nice movement of clouds in the sky. Lit the left side, and I'm out in the dark. This is pitch black out there. Then ran over to the right and lit up the right side. And I had to do it many times. And, you know, I'm happy I didn't kill myself in the dark running back and forth. But, you know, that way I get light coming from multiple directions, and it's looking even better. So my workhorse is the Stanley Fat Max. I take this baby with me everywhere, and it's just a handheld light. I add a little carabiner on the bottom so I can clip it to my camera bag or my belt or whatever and make it. And I also love the Nebo Redline Flex 450 lumen flashlight, which lets you focus the beam. And so on my website, lorenphotos.com/gear, I list a lot of wacky gear things that I have. And so my lights are on there. So, you don't have to write down exactly what flashlight I'm using. They're all right there on my gear page. So you can take a look at that.
Many sizes of the Fat Max? I mean, is there a certain
Nope,
size?
Fat Max is that's the baby. That's the baby.
Is that heavy or is it pretty
No.
light?
No, it's a rechargeable flashlight. With you can see how big it is by the hand trigger there, and then the little Nebo underneath it.
Loren, when I bought my Fat Max, I think there are several models.
Yeah, they're all about the same. So one of them's rechargeable, one of them's not. Well, no, I guess they're all rechargeable. One of them is a USB charger. One of them has a special charger for it. Okay. So as I'm using this Fat Max, I'm kicking light in every place. I mean, I love just kicking some light in on something. Lots of times it really comes down to how can I match the intensity of the existing light. So this is where I live in Somerville, New Jersey, and when I kick some light in on that monument and then on the hotel across the street, makes a world of difference. So look at it again. So you notice that the monument is dark, and then the sign on the hotel across the street and the roof of the hotel on the left. As I do a 30-second exposure, I even everything out. Same way with a library here in Woodstock, Vermont. It's very cool, but it's dark. Boom, hit it with a 30-second, during a 30-second exposure, I'm light painting the outside of it and then just making my exposure match the light on the inside of it. It's just like painting a wall, with paint. You don't throw the bucket of paint at the wall, you just smooth it out as you go. And, a beautiful scene over in Quechee, Vermont, but the only light is one spotlight right there on the waterfalls. But when I bring out the flashlight, that can light the whole baby up. And actually this one, I used 2 of them, and I'm standing there on a bridge and shining two flashlights at the same time to light up the water and the background and the wall and the whole scene.
How do you know how much to use the flashlight? I mean, the amount of times, just experimentation?
It's all experimenting. Yep. It's try it, and if it was too bright that time, do it less. If it's too dark, do it more. It's that simple. It really comes down to just practicing, just trying it. Again, another scene that's about as mundane as a sneaker sitting on a pizza box, but kick some light onto her. I lit up the front with the Fat Max, and the back, I have another big flashlight I'll show you here in a minute. But you'll notice that these outside shots, almost all of them are shot during blue hour, that time of day, about 20 minutes after sunset, when the sky just becomes this gorgeous blue light. And it's, a great time to shoot, but a lot of times you get just silhouettes until you kick in just a little bit of light. So this one I just have a little mag light, no snoot on it, just far enough away that this little mag light, which is 4 inches long, just kicked a little light up there on the top where it says Columbia Bridge, waited for a car to drive through, it lit up the inside, and my exposure was based on whatever I needed to get that sky right. So it was 30 seconds at about f8, ISO 100.
Lauren, the other photos that Quechee, I think it was, I forget, where there was interior light that was lighting up whatever structure was there, plus you did the lighting from your handheld, and you not knowing how long you're going to have to expose for the handheld, how do you adjust? Or it's just, again, trial and error. You have to change your aperture or something to minimize or maximize the interior light for that, I guess.
So you set your camera exposure for the interior lights. Then you add however long you have to hold that flashlight on the scene to match that interior light. Same way with this. Whatever that exterior, whatever the light is for the sky, whatever your setting is for that, or this, you know, you then hold the flashlight on your subject until it matches that amount of light. Now you're not going to do it in one shot. You know, you're going to have to try it a lot. You know, you know, this is a bridge here in Woodstock that I light up so many times. The neighbors have come to know me and almost like me. But it again is what's my exposure for the sky? Because then I add my light to make it match that. However long I have to hold that light on, right?
I see. So you do it by how long you hold the light, not how long the exposure is. The exposure is determined by static exposure that you can't control.
Exactly. Right. I can't control that sky. You know.
Got it.
You know, so I was here in Bridgewater one night, or in Woodstock one night, and I had a group up there, and a police officer came by, and he's, you know, so I walked over and talked to him and told him what I was doing and how cool it looked when lights streak through the bridge. And he said, "You want me to turn my blue lights on?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And so he lit up the whole place for me. I lit up the end of the bridge. His blue lights lit up the rest of the world for me, and makes for a pretty cool shot. So the question online, you ever run into other photographers while photographing? Yes. And I tell them, I'm going to make this place look a hell of a lot cooler than it does right now. And you're welcome to use my light. If they don't want the light, I'll say, okay, hang on, we'll take a break. But usually I'm in places where there's nobody. So I don't run into that very often, but, usually if people think I don't want that light, once they see what I'm doing, they'll go, oh yeah, that's fine. Keep it coming. Keep it coming.
Loren, do you start by, you expose the sky or whatever first?
So I'm determining my exposure by what's my exposure for the sky. So if I don't have my flashlight turned on, what would my exposure be for the sky? In this case, it's I had to bump my ISO up to 800 at f2.8 for 30 seconds. Now I need to turn my flashlight on, however long it needs to be on to be at 2.8 light streaming across there. Okay. I mean, it's that simple. It's not real complex. However, whatever that sky needs to be, I'm putting light down to match it. I'm just holding my flashlight on to match it. Okay, so whoever's got some noise going there, please mute yourself because I can't mute right now. So this is over in Pennsylvania, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Again, my light's my Fat Max, and this one, you know, couldn't light it long enough to not be streaky, so it looks a little more streaky than some of the others. I usually carry a little light in my camera bag. But I was in New York one time with a group last year, and I didn't have my light with me. So one of the other guys had his nice little light. So we blasted the Bow Bridge there on the right, just lit it up, and let the rest of the world look the way it does. If I didn't have that light, it would just, the whole right half of the picture would be dark. It'd be nothing. It wouldn't be a picture. So you don't always have to get you know, a lot of light on something, you know, just a little light. This one, I just put a little light on that car on the lower right. So your light can be a fill light. It doesn't have to be the main light. You just want to make something stand out a little bit. So when I was in Venice last year, I liked the scene, but I didn't like how dark it got down along the canal. So I just got out my little flashlight that I was carrying with me and just lit up that part of the side of the building. Again, I didn't want my flashlight to be the main light, didn't want it to be bright. I just wanted to fill in that little bit of area there. And I'll use all kinds of lights. This is lit with my iPhone. You know, doesn't matter. 30 seconds exposure out in the Hamptons, and just walked along with my iPhone and lit it up. I'll use lighting to save my butt a lot of times. I was shooting this. I was out in the forest and saw this cool looking leaf that had fallen down in the a maple leaf down into a birch tree, and thought, oh, that's really cool. And I shot some pictures of that. That just sucks. So I got out my little mag light, turned it on, went over to the side. I'm doing a 3.2 second exposure, and since I have that nice directional light, boom, I've got a shot. Or I'll use that little light to make my main subject pop. So again, this was pretty flat light. I was in the deep shade. Hit it with my, just light up that tree a little bit and it jumps right out.
Lauren? Is there a way that you could just light up that tree and have it jump right out in Lightroom?
Not if you don't have any detail in it. I mean, if you did multiple exposures and I could work on that photo, that first photo for an hour and make it look like the second one, which took me literally, 20 seconds to pull the flashlight out of my bag and light it up. So, I'd rather do anything in camera than in computer that I can.
Loren, here's a question about contrast. What would happen, I don't know if you've ever tried this because you're going to lose some stops, but have you ever tried using, on something colorful, a polarizing filter and having the beam at an angle to the subject? Rather than trying to build up contrast in Photoshop, do it right there when you're taking the shot.
Well, it would eliminate glare. It might not build contrast, but if there's glare coming off the light, it could do something. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
You always have to have your tripod. So in a situation like the woods, you have to find a place where you could actually get that tripod stable.
It's pretty rare you're going to see a picture I shoot that wasn't shot with a tripod. That's just part of my equipment. I don't shoot without tripod. But especially when it's dark out. But during the day, I rarely shoot without a tripod. That's the way I shoot. There's another video online about that. But yeah, carry your tripod. So you don't always have to blast things with light. You can just kick in a little bit. This is a waterfalls in Iceland, and I drove 2.5 hours before sunrise to get to, and got there and found out it was frozen, and oh crap. But just kicked a little bit of light onto the frozen falls to make them stand out. When I didn't have the light on it, it just didn't look like anything. So you don't have to overpower it with light. You can just do a little bit. Again, this one's with the iPhone. I tripped the shutter. It's a 30-second exposure. Tripped the shutter, walked up the road, had my iPhone flashlight turned on, shine it around on the bridge on the road a little bit, and as I walk back, I get a nice exposure. And I'm not going to show up in the picture as long as there's no light hitting me, or I'm not in between the camera and where the light is shining. So, I'm all over this photo, but you can't see me because there's no light hitting me, right? That makes sense.
What do you mean trip the shutter? What?
I mean, when I hit a 30-second exposure, I hit the shutter button. I'm doing a 30-second exposure. I'm walking up there and lighting it up and walking back. And by the time I get back, I can chimp it and see what it looks like, and then do another shot and go light it again and come back and do it again.
Did you say hit the shutter? Or I thought you used another word.
Trip, hit, ignite, stomp on the shutter button, whatever. I'm firing the camera. Yes.
What I'm not clear about, when you say I'm all over this picture, but you don't see me, I mean, there has to be some light on you when you walk, even though there's not a lot. So how are you not in the picture?
It's dark out. There's no light hitting me. If there's no light on something, it becomes dark, right? It's just like the trees. You don't see the leaves on the trees because there's no light hitting them. So if there's no light hitting me while I'm shining the light on something, I'm not going to show up. Right? That makes sense? So where the bridge is, I'm not standing between the left side of the bridge and the camera while I'm lighting the left side of the bridge. I'm standing on the right side of the bridge while I light the left side. When I light the right side, I stand on the left side of the bridge. That way the light's not between, I'm not between the camera and what's being lit, so I don't show up.
It's also a 30-second exposure, so you're not in one place for too long.
Right. Right. There's not enough light hitting me to make to render anything on the camera. So I I have fun with lights. I use little cube lights. There's all different brands of them. They're little about 2-inch square lights, battery powered. Put some colored filters on them, stick them inside the bridge, let them shine, and then go back out and slightly light the covered bridge from the outside. Again, another 30-second exposure. Almost all these will be 30-second. And so, all kinds of lights.
Why are these, what makes it that it's all 30-second? Because
when you're doing astrophotography, 30 seconds is the longest most cameras will do an exposure. So that just gives you a good working time. When it's dark out, it doesn't matter how long, hit a 30-second exposure. That way you've got plenty of time to move around. If you're doing stars, if you do it longer than a 30-second exposure, they become blurs. So I'm working mainly 30-second exposures. So this one, I had three of those little cubes, put one inside the cab of this truck, one underneath the back, one underneath the front, different color gels on them, and then light up the truck from the outside. And it looks pretty fun. So you can put colored filters or gels on anything any of the lights, and you can just go nuts with it.
Loren, I found some aqua LED based lights, and they work with the remote control.
Yes.
And they're also waterproof, which is nice. And the remote works from 30 feet. It's called the Aqua.
Cool. Yeah, those are fun. These ones, these cheapies that I bought, I don't remember what they even are. Yeah, they're app based, so I can turn them on and off using an app, and so I can control 3 of them from my phone. So it's pretty cool. There's a whole bunch of different lights out there. So again, a cool scene, moon's lighting the sky, but I want to see some detail, so I have to light it up. Then I have something special, something a lot more fun. And then there's times when I got to get out the big boy. So this is an island in Vermont, and it's about 250 yards away. And so I get out the big flashlight for this baby. And so the flashlight is only hitting the island, so it is only lighting up the island. Again, light painting, just smooth across, so 30-second exposure. I got lucky, got a shooting star flying through the corner. So in this one, I'm using my Cyclops, and it's a big sucker. It's an 18 million candle power beast, and that's my little Nebo sitting beside it. So it will light up things way in the distance. And once you start practicing using these lights, you can repeat it. It's repeatable. So the first one of the island was shot a couple of years ago. Maybe it was last year, 2 years ago. This one was last fall. Same thing. Just painting that light across there makes for wonderful things. The only bad thing about the Cyclops is it's a beast to pack and travel with. It takes up about half my suitcase, so I don't travel with it a whole lot. But this was out in Oregon, and so I lit up a waterfalls with it. I didn't do my light painting as nice as I'd want. I didn't hit the bottom. I thought I was farther up in the frame when I was shooting, because it was literally pitch black out there. I could see nothing, and that was fairly far away. I think that somebody's asked what the name of the cubes are. They're probably on my gear page. If they're not, they will be within an hour after we are done, but I think I have them on the gear page, on lorenphotos.com/gear. You can see the name of the and the Cyclops is on there too. So this is a lighthouse down in Cape May, New Jersey, and standing back, probably 200 yards, just lighting her up. And it just does a hell of a job. Up in Maine, a beaver pond, again, it's pitch black out, just get that little bit of light in the sky, 30-second exposure. I light up a couple of beaver hutches. A beaver swam by, so I put the light on him, and he slapped the water to warn everybody else that there's weirdos up there with cameras and big flashlight. So.
One question, because you were lighting up waterfalls. So I'm sure you've been to the Patterson waterfalls. What would you use for something like that? Like, is that something that requires one of your gigantic Cyclops type flashlights?
No, the Fat Max would probably handle that, but it's pretty, there's a lot of street lights around there. So you're gonna have a real problem with existing light. You're better off, you're better off shooting in the dark. So if you have existing light, you have to deal with that. And if it's a big scene, you don't have enough time to shine your light on everything. So you can do multiple exposures and stick them together in Photoshop if you want, but it's
True.
much
But
tougher.
I was there at night or pretty late because I had lost something and I went back and it was pretty empty. It was dark.
Well, empty doesn't matter, and dark is relative, because what you think is dark and what the camera think is dark is way different. So a lot of times you'll get a scene like this that's you think that's pretty dark, but the street lights are really lighting it up. This is outside a hotel I was at in Italy, and so the street lights are one color. So these street lights were pretty yellow orange, and then this fountain with the statue in it was dark, so I had to light up the statue. So the light of my flashlight compared to the street lights was pretty cool, pretty blue. So I will use a filter on my flashlight, and for my Fat Max, I've got a couple of them. I took the front lens off of it, cut an orange filter out to match the daylight. A little round filter, pop the cover back on, and so now I have a warmer light. So I've adjusted the color of my my lights. So most of them I use a warm filter over them just to make them pop. And so even a tree out in the middle of a field looks pretty interesting when you get the moon shining over the top and you light it from two different directions. That light will really pop, really make something like that pop. I love shooting astrophotography. I love the Milky Way. Down in Chile and driving along and pulled off in a dark spot, and there happened to be a stuffed chair sitting there, old chair. Get that light at an angle, always looking to be angled, and just pop some light on the foreground. Adds a lot of interest to any scene. This one used a little bit of backlight coming against it. So,
Loren, how do you, like, if you're taking a meter of what the scene is, how do you do that in the dark?
I usually get there before it gets dark and wait. Or I go back. I go to a place that I've been before and go back. That's a total different conversation. That's a whole long conversation. So I'm not gonna have time to get into that right now. Okay. It's just I find myself in cemeteries a lot. They're open space. I'm usually not bothering anybody. They don't care. And they have something cool in the foreground to light up. So just about anywhere you can find a cemetery, and they don't have a lot of lights in them. So I think that's just a fun way or fun place to find something to light up. And you'll notice my light is rarely coming from the direction of the camera. I'm always coming at the side or from the back. So I create much better shadows. And shadows add depth and drama and detail to photos. It's the shadows that really make things pop. So I'm looking to add shadows whenever I can, and highlights, and just really make things glow by having those shadows and the highlights contrasting each other. So again, I don't need to light up the whole scene, just a portion of it. This is with the Fat Max. Most scenes are, I'm too close to them to use the big Cyclops. I only use the Cyclops on something that is way far away. because it is too bright for what I'm trying to do. So Fat Max does almost everything I'm trying to do. A little bit of light is better than a lot, very frequently. I don't want to illuminate the whole place and make it look like daylight, although sometimes that can be cool. But just kicking a little bit of light in here and there just really makes a scene pop. It's so easy to overpower the shot with too much light, and especially when you're doing astrophotography, you're doing long exposures at high ISO. Here the flashlight was probably on maybe 1 second, and it probably wasn't even my Fat Max. It's probably one of the little handhelds. Actually, this one I shot using the light is from my headlamp. So I just turned it, aimed down at the ground and at the bridge for a second or two, and then get it off the scene because it's going to overpower it really, really quick. Sometimes I like having the light source showing in there. So I have this little line of light. So the barn glowing at the bottom by itself would look pretty weird, but by having just this little kick of light heading down towards it, it looks pretty cool. So everything we're talking about today is using light to paint something. We're not seeing the light source itself. We're not spinning lights around and doing all that kind of thing. That's a different thing altogether. But we're just using the light to illuminate something, and just lighting up the ground there going towards this barn. If you really analyze the light there, that the light on the right side of the barn cannot be coming from the light you're seeing on the ground coming from the left. It just you can't do that. So again, I light the left side, 30-second exposure, run around to the right, bring some light in from the right side to give it a little more depth to the light. This one's an old schoolhouse where I put the flashlight, shined it in through the window, and lit up the inside of the place, and then held, it's the Fat Max, held the Fat Max up into the air and let the beam of the light show up. It's a fun thing to do once in a while too, is get the beam of that light in there, showing through. Star trails are a lot of fun to do, and they all look similar unless you have something in the foreground, and then you just kick a little light into there, and you've got a way different picture by kicking that light up in there and having it illuminate something in the foreground. And it really, the whole key to this is finding some darkness and getting out your flashlight, see what's flying by, lighting it up, and then just practicing and working on it, and it is all just a ton of fun. So I have a couple of workshops coming up in Vermont in June and July, night skies and light painting, where we'll do a lot of light painting, we'll do some astrophotography, we'll do all kinds of things. I'm pretty sure Vermont will be open by then. I looked this morning, and there's only 5 people in the hospital with COVID-19 in Vermont, and all of Vermont right today. So I'm feeling pretty sure that middle of June will be pretty good here in Vermont. So come on up. It'll be a lot of fun. So these are on my website on lorenphotos.com. A lot more information there. So again, the gear I use is on my website, Loren Photos gear. If those cubes aren't on there, I'll add them this afternoon. I can't remember if they're there or not, but we'll put the cubes on there too. So any other questions about doing a little light painting?
Yeah, with the...
Lauren, I have a question. When you're actually painting, say you're going left to right, do you risk of having an area where it's like, say you come in from the left and then you come in from the right, but say when you come in from the right, you've hit the left again, so it's too bright?
Yes. So you do it again, and don't do that again. So yeah, yes. So there's a lot of bad frames, a lot of bad shots when you're doing this, because it's not exact. and every time you do it, it's going to look a little different. So even when I think I have one right, I'll do it again several more times because the light might look better the next time. And it just depends on where that light's coming from and going to and all of that. So there's a lot of mistakes that happen.
Loren, Jim here. Quick question on the second to last photo you showed where you had concentric circles of star trails. What star do you focus on? Are you focusing on like the North Star? So
yes.
Everything else is kind of going around that?
Yeah. Yeah. In the Northern Hemisphere, the North Star, everything rotates around it.
Okay. Thank you.
Same as Polaris. Look up Polaris. That's the North Star.
Yeah, Polaris.
Loren, I'm just one last question on this. When you're in with the pen light and you're doing those inside, you take a meter reading of that first?
No, you're in the dark. You're in the dark. You're just shining a light and then looking at your camera and seeing, oh, that was too bright or too dark, and then doing it again and changing how long or how close you're holding the light.
Loren.
Yes.
I took your workshop up in Vermont last year, and I did the light painting, and I sold at least 4, if not 5 prints because it was so fabulous.
I want a kickback.
I know.
Get royalties. No, that's
but
great.
It's fabulous.
Very
it was my
good.
first time, and it was wonderful.
Oh, great.
Yep.
Glad to hear that, Jackie. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Hey, Loren, it's John Hooker. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, John.
Next year? I know it's really
I
far
think
ahead, but
problem.
do you plan to do them next year? I'm not sure I'll be able to make it. There's a lot going on.
Yes, I'm soon we'll be scheduling the next year. They'll be on in June and July, maybe August. We'll have to see when the new moon is out or not out. So I always do them around the new moon so the sky is dark. So if I'm doing astrophotography, it's in the dark. John, you had a question?
Yeah, you're not getting the feedback now, are you?
No.
Okay, I'm thinking the problem is the spacebar on my wireless keyboard. But to speak, just unmuting the mic, I'm okay.
Okay, good.
I think I figured it out. Thanks.
Good.
What about the supermoon tonight?
Oh.
The last one of the year.
Yep, I'll be out there.
Supermoons tonight? Oh, wow.
What do you do in particular?
Well, you can't do stars because it's too bright. So you got to do something else.
What lens do you use the most?
What lens? Well, it depends what I'm shooting. For stars, a 14 millimeter 2.8.
Yeah.
Loren?
Yes.
This is Matthew.
Hi, Matthew.
Like do the light painting with colored lighting sources, like putting a gel over the flashlight or doing something like that. And have you ever done that? Because I think that could create some really, really cool effects.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you can light one side with red and one side with blue and one side with white and background with green, whatever. Sure, mix up your colors if you like that look. You bet.
Have you ever done that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what essentially I was doing. I showed a couple with the lights inside the truck and the bridge. For me personally, I don't want the outside of a covered bridge to be blue or red, but having some weird color coming out of the inside is kind of curious. So it depends what you're shooting. Sure.
Sure. But with the light patterns like that one that you showed us, I'm sure you could do some really, really cool. Yeah,
I mean, it's a whole different thing. To have the light, the flashlight or LED lights or whatever in the shot, and you're spinning them around or whatever you're doing. We might do one of those on that later, but I prefer just using light painting as the source of light and make it a little mysterious of where that light's coming from.
Loren, when you use your lights, your flashlights, your Cyclops,
Are they ever setting stationary, like on the ground? Or
No.
are you always moving?
Always moving. Always
You're-
moving.
You're always moving it.
Yeah,
Okay.
or you'll get a hot spot. You'll get a bright spot. You know, if you think of
Okay.
it like in a theater with a spotlight on somebody, or when they turn the spotlight off and the whole place is evenly lit. You know,
Okay.
You know, if you
Gotcha.
want that spotlight look, you could get it, but that's not a look I'm going for
That's
ever.
my point. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Lauren, how long did you leave the shutter open for the Star Trails?
Well, it depends on which one. Anywhere from 20 minutes to 3 hours. That's a whole nother discussion. But it's not one exposure, it's multiple exposures that are put together in a program called Star Stacks. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks
Thank you. That's really good information.
Thank you.